Well, I certainly appreciate everybody being here this morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is David Collinsworth, and I'm the GM CEO of the Brazos River Authority. I've been in this role for a little over a year now. I've been with the BRA for 25 years now. So I've been around a while, so I know most of you. If I don't, I look forward to getting to know you. We have a kind of a quick agenda today. Should have you out by lunch. We have some very important things to talk about. It was really good to see so many of you in Waco about a month and a half ago for what we called our State of the Basin meeting. That's just a process that we're trying to go through to where we get together more than once a year to update you on the things that impact your water rates, that impact your water supply. So we're going to talk about a few of those today. And then give you plenty of time for questions and answers and feed you lunch and then just have some time to fellowship and talk after lunch hour long you feel that you want to talk, and we'll stay around as long as we need to. I would like to acknowledge a few folks that took their time to be here today. One of our board members, for those of you that don't know, we have a 21-member board that's appointed by the governor. And one of our new board members from the Georgetown area, Dr. Judy Crone, is here. Judy, thanks for coming very much. Also, Bell County Judge David Blackburn is here. Where are you, David? Thank you very much for taking your time to be here. Bell County Commissioner Bill Schuman is here. Thank you very much. And then also from Representative Shine's office, Lamar Lewis. Thank you, Lamar. Where are you? Yeah. I know you guys are just coming down off being really, really busy. So thank you for being here and all you do. So if you have an agenda with you, here's kind of what we're going to do today. Our CFO is going to walk you through our water rates and how the projections look for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. So we'll talk a little bit about our rate making and how that looks. I've asked Tiffany Morgan to talk a little bit about our environmental program, the water quality monitoring that we do, because I think it's important that you understand what we're looking at, what we're looking for, what we do, so that if you begin throughout your time to understand and identify water quality concerns, you can come to us and we can help understand how we need to monitor those situations. Water quality is very important to us in the river and very much a focus of ours as that water flows into our source water reservoirs. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Matt Phillips will talk a little bit about everything that's happened in the last 4 months of the legislative session as it relates to water and Brazos River Authority. Not everything. That's a different meeting. That's a different talk show over. So we've got some real exciting news coming out of the legislative session as far as the BRA is concerned in Allen's Creek. So he'll update you on that. And then to start the meeting, Aaron is going to talk a little bit about our water supply. And if you're looking at your phone and you see water coming in, rain coming in from the west, I think he's going to spend a little bit of time telling you about why that's not a good thing. And for those of you from the municipal world, you're probably not needing any more rainfall either, are you? So anyway, I'm going to turn the program over to Aaron. After each presenter, we'll take some time so you can ask questions that are fresh on your mind for that subject. But anyway, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Aaron?
Thank you. Morning, everybody. We wanted to do a couple things today. One is to kind of give you an overview of where we've been over the last 12 months as far as water supply and the hydrologic conditions. As most of you know, we are flush with water right now. The other thing we wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about our long-term contracting and system operation permit going forward with that. We did update you a little bit in the March meeting. So we'll update y'all regarding that. So go ahead and get started here. This is a graphic that we've shown over the last couple of years, and you may be familiar with it. We provide a drought monitor and a reservoir capacity map that you'll see here on a weekly basis on our website. This is one of the products that a lot of people find helpful. But over here on the right, you'll see the U.S. drought monitor overlaid with our reservoir capacity of our reservoirs. You'll have see the drought intensity legend U.S. Drought Monitor is put together by USDA, the National Drought Mitigation Center, and a couple other entities that basically qualitatively show where drought is or where it's not in this legend here. As you can see, right now we're obviously drought-free, but at the basin completely is drought-free. And it's the first time we've been drought-free probably since 2016 or so. The map here on the lower left is the same map that you see here, except the end of May of 2018. And you can see we did have some drought areas in the central basin and the upper parts of the basin last year. And then you'll see this other map of about this time in 2017. We did have some areas with drought, but less so. And then obviously 2015, 2016 was a significantly wet period as well, similar to what we experiencing now. So, you know, how do we get from 2018 to 2019 now? You know, departure from normal rainfall is what we look at and what impacts the stream flow and reservoir levels. And so we have two maps here that shows a period from October 1st, 2017 through June 25th, 2018. This map comes from NOAA, from the National Weather Service, and these oranges and yellows depict how either above or below normal the departure from normal rainfall is. So you can see here these negative numbers are bad, meaning below normal rainfall, and for this period, this 9-month period, we did see quite a bit of below normal rainfall, primarily in the central part of the basin. We did experience the drought conditions last year that were pretty significant. We had to make downstream water supply releases throughout parts of the summer. And then we have this other map here on the right. It kind of we basically flipped the switch, and we all live. Everybody knows we live in Texas, and that switch can get flipped pretty quickly. So right now, looking at from October 1st, 2018 through about last week, you can see most of the basin, most of the central part of Texas, and even up in the Panhandle, are anywhere from 8 to 20 inches above normal for this time period. So a lot of rainfall over that last 9 months, and that really started in the September time frame of last year. So how do these two maps correlate to stream flow and water availability? And that's what we'll talk about here. I want to step through this slide. This is an interesting slide, but I want to walk you through it. So we have the June through August flow volume at the Brazos River USGS gauge at Hempstead. Hempstead is about 200 river miles upstream of the Gulf. And what we did is we looked at the flow volume, so the amount of water that flowed past that point from June through August of every year at that gauge from 1939 through 2018. So you can see some spikes that are, mainly more normal years or wet years, and then you see these lower years. Last year, in 2018, we recorded one of the lowest flow volumes, June through August flow volumes ever in this area from 1939 to 2018. On average, it's about 1.14 million acre feet that flows past the Hempstead gauge in that June through August flow volume. So we were about an eighth of what we normally get. So that was the result of that dry area, mainly in the central part of the basin. Right around here, Bell County, Clinton County, over the limestone was severely below normal. Fast forwarding a little bit, we went downstream about 100 river miles to the Richmond gauge and looked at the same information. So the Richmond gauge, the period of record goes back to 1903. So that's 115 years of data. And we looked at the October to December flow volume at the Richmond gauge on every single year. There is a data gap from about 1907 to the early 20s in the 19th century, or the 20th century. But if you look at each of these flow volumes for October, December, the end of 2018 was the highest flow volume that we've ever seen at the Richmond Gauge. It was about 5.5 million acre feet for those 3 periods, or those 3-month periods. So if you look at 5.5 million acre feet, that could supply all of the customers of the BOA water supply system for about 18 years, over 18 years. So that's a significant amount of water. And it's kind of hard to believe that the June through August period was one of the driest just upstream. And then at Richmond, the October to December was the wettest. So we can flip a switch in Texas, and this is kind of representative of that. This is our status of our system right now. We put this out on a weekly basis, usually every Wednesday. This is looking across our basin. Probably if you're sitting in San Angelo, looking towards Texarkana. So the far left, you see the Sierra upstream Reservoir PK, Granbury, Whitney, on down. You can see Belton, Stillhouse, and Georgetown are here. And we have tabulated the percent pulls of all the reservoirs in the drawdown. So this was as of May 29th, and there has been no change. All the reservoirs are full as far as the conservation. Most of the reservoirs in the core system are storing water in flood pool, and we came by downstream to Belton today, and they're releasing about 5,000 cubic feet per second. So there's water in the river, water in the reservoirs, and will be so for at least another month or so, depending on what kind of rain we get before summer really ramps up. So going forward, we look at the U.S. seasonal drought outlook. A lot of people look at this. This is released about once a month by the National Weather Service and NOAA. Texas is in the white. That means no drought development, obviously, is likely. And really, most of the U.S. is drought-free. And I think I've seen in the last month or so, the drought monitor has been, we've had the least amount of drought area in the lower 48 than we have in the last 20 or so years. So it's an interesting information there. So the system operation permit, long-term contracting. We updated y'all, I think, in the March meeting regarding long-term contracting and the system operation permit. We did go to the board in late April and presented them with a recommended allocation of long-term contracts and the permit of about 100,000 acre feet. So we started coordinating with the customers on the request list and started talking about the contract amounts. We will be updating our contract forms in the July board meeting. We anticipate doing that later next month, and then begin executing the contracts in August, and try to look forward for those contracts to be active for start of September and FY 2020. Last thing I wanted to talk about was the annual water use and reservoir counting. We post this usually late March, early April on our website, and it basically details, and I don't expect y'all to read this. I think we have copies on the back table that you can drill down and look at all the information. Providing water use by location and some of the specifics related to reservoirs and the inflows and evaporation and the water use breakdown by tide. So this is something that we've done over the past 6 or 7 years. I think dating back to 2013 or 2014, we'll continue to do that going forward. It's a good one-sheet piece of information. It has a lot of information there, but I encourage you to look at that going forward. That's all I have.
Any questions for Eric right now? All right.
Good morning. Everybody hear me? So I'm going to give you, as David said, I'm going to give you guys an overview of some of the stuff that happened during the session, particularly as it relates to water. As everyone knows, it was a pretty weighty session with some pretty big issues that the legislature covered, particularly as it relates to public school finance and property tax reform. I'm not going to get into any of those. Depending on where you sit on those issues, You either think they did a really good job or a really cool job. I think as somebody who spent the last 140 days down there, the fact that they're not coming back anytime soon is a success in and of itself. Very happy about that. But I'm going to cover just kind of a handful of the water-related bills that passed. There's a report in the back that goes into a much greater level of detail on all the different water bills. That report was put together by the Texas Water Conservation Association, who we work very close with on legislation. So if you get a chance, take that with you, read it. It's got much more detailed information than I'm going to very briefly today. Going into the session, we all knew that flooding would be an issue. This was the first session on the tail end of Hurricane Harvey. So the legislature ended up passing a handful of flood-related bills. They started out with a lot of flood-related bills. I kind of joke that it seems that every member of the legislature had a flood-related bill at one point or another. But obviously, as the process does, it dwindles them down and ended up with a lot less. Probably the most significant on this list are Senate Bill 7, 8, and HJR 4. When you put all those together, they do a couple of things. One, Senate Bill 7 and HJR 4 combined create a set of funds that provide a funding mechanism for flood-related projects in the future. So they can fund things related to updating floodplain maps, Hurricane Harvey recovery, federal match dollars, future flood infrastructure. So it's kind of a whole suite of things that can be funded through the funds that are created in Senate Bill 7 and HJR 4. So that's the state kind of stepping up and providing funding for flooding in the future, or to prepare for flooding in the future. HJR 4 will obviously have to be approved by the voters in November, but all told, if you combine all of the different funds that are in Senate Bill 7 and HJR 4, and what was in the supplemental appropriations bill, which is Senate Bill 500, the legislature will end up appropriating approximately $1.7 billion from the rainy day fund for flooding in the future. The other aspect of those three bills is Senate Bill 8, and that's one of the funds that's actually included in Senate Bill 7, so they're tied together. But Senate Bill 8 creates a statewide flood planning process, and that will be very similar to the regional water planning process that many of you are already familiar with. Where the states broken up into regions, those regions look at projects that benefit either areas within the region or the region as a whole, and then the projects that come out of that process are eligible for funding and will be eligible for funding out of the funds created in Senate Bill 7 and HJR 4. The kicker here is that the state flood planning process will likely take about 5 years to completely put together the first round of planning. So it'll be a while before projects like that will be eligible for funding, because the process itself will be being put together. But eventually those will be part of what's funded under Senate Bill 7. What you can take from that is the Water Development Board, who is supposed to administer all this, has a lot of work to do in the next year to 2 years, putting together all the processes that will be necessary, all the rulemaking, the application processes that people are going to have to go through in order to apply for this funding. That's going to take a lot of work on their part, so it'll be something to watch out for. Senate Bill 6 is more related to emergency preparedness and training. Texas Division of Emergency Management will train local jurisdictions on how to respond and be better prepared for disasters. Another interesting aspect of that bill is it has a degree study to study the different roles and responsibilities as it relates to wet and debris removal during and after a disaster. So that'll be something to watch. There's really, it's sometimes hard to define whose role it is to remove debris in water courses. And so there'll be a study that tries to look at defining those roles and responsibilities. And then House Bill 26 is a dam release notification bill. It requires dam operators such as Grass River Authority to notify downstream emergency operations centers when they make releases. And then it requires those emergency operations centers to notify the public a certain number of things, including the duration of the release, the severity of the release, potential flooding, road closures, there's a whole list of different things. For us, this is something that we already do. We already work very closely with downstream EOCs and notify them when we're making releases, but it wasn't a statewide requirement. So House Bill 26 puts that in statute, puts it in TCEQ. They'll create a program. You'll have to have a dam plan that shows how you're going to notify folks. So those are kind of the flood-related bills. Overall, pretty significant in terms of the amount of funding allocated, nearly $2 billion. The things that didn't happen related to flooding that we were concerned with going into the session were changes in dam operations. We were concerned that the knee-jerk reaction to Hurricane Harvey, you might see changes in how you operate. You're allowed to operate water supply reservoirs. And and requirements for things like pre-releasing the reservoirs in advance of weather forecasts or seasonal lowering of reservoirs, things that in our minds not only cost water supply, but can also make flooding worse depending on where the rain falls. So none of that happened. We think that was good. Surface water, really quiet session as it related to surface water. A couple of different bills passed. Updating of the water availability models, as everybody knows, TCQ, Basin water right permitting and water availability models. Most of the models for the basins in Texas have not been updated in many years. Almost all of them do not reflect the 2011 to 2015 drought, so the legislature passed a bill requiring the updating of those models. House Bill 1964 allows for minor amendments to water rights that aren't going to affect other water rights to be moved through the process faster, so that you have a little bit less of a backlog. It's an efficiency measure. So it allows water rights that are very minor amendments to move through the process more quickly. Groundwater was a little bit more active. A few of these bills, House Bill 720, which is related to aquifer storage and recovery projects, it makes the appropriation of water put in a water course that is going to be used for an ASR project easier to get, so it makes that permitting process more efficient. ASR studies by the Water Development Board requires the Water Development Board to study areas of the state where aquifer storage and recovery might be used, might be beneficial. And then House Bill 722, which makes the permitting process for the development of brackish groundwater a little bit more standard, uniform, more efficient. All of those bills were actually passed last session, but they were vetoed by the governor. I do believe they'll get more of a friendly reception this time around, so I do think those will pass, but a lot of us are very familiar with those because we saw them last session. And House Bill 1066 essentially requires, if you're an exporter of groundwater, the groundwater district has to align the timing of your transfer permit with the timing of your production permit. So we can't give you a production permit for 10 years and a transfer permit for 2 years. They have to link up the length of time of both of those permits. And that's something that was proposed last session, didn't pass, and we pass it this session. And I'll conclude with this one, and David alluded to it. This is probably the biggest bill that we had this session that relates to the Allen Street Reservoir. As everyone knows, we've been working for the last decade to try to get Allen Street Reservoir to get that project moving. We are co-owners or joint permittees on that project with the city of Houston. They're the majority owner, we're the minority owner. Our basin is badly in need of that project, much more so than Houston. In fact, all relevant planning documents show that Houston has zero need for that project and won't any time in the future. And so we have attempted over the last decade a variety of ways to work with Houston to move that project forward, whether it be under the current ownership arrangement. At one point, we offered to front load, even as the minority project owner, to front load all of the funding and payments for that project and then let Houston pay us back later. Do that, and then most recently over the last couple of years, we've offered buyout options, let us buy out their interest. And we made some progress with that, but then eventually got nowhere. So what essentially happened is there are some eventual users of the water from that reservoir approached the legislature about passing a bill that would require Houston to accept the buyout. That bill was passed up both the House and the Senate. It was signed by the governor this last weekend, and it will require Houston to transfer all of its ownership in the Allen Street Reservoir project to the Brazos River Authority. We will reimburse Houston for all of their costs to date, which they have stated is $23 million. We will pay them that. We will obtain full ownership so that we can begin the full permitting process and begin moving that project forward. So, pretty big deal. Something that we thought might be necessary in terms of a legislative solution. Didn't necessarily think it was going to be successful. It was extremely successful. So, we'll hopefully start working with Houston to effectuate the transfer which is required under House Bill 2846. Send them the money, we'll sign a contract, they'll transfer their interest in the water right permit, the property, all that kind of thing. Once we have 100% ownership free and clear, then the BRA can begin the full permitting process and hopefully get that project going. So, I think that's.
I want to set some expectations with Allen Street. 404 we think takes 5 to 8 years. Construction takes another 4 to 5 years. So we're embarking on a mission that probably takes 12 to 15 years, being worst, I would say worst case scenario. Could it happen in 10 years? Yes. Is it likely? No. But you know, let's just say 10 to 15 years would have 100,000 acre feet of additional water available for the lower basin. The benefit that it provides for the rest of the basin is that it's going to be an off-channel reservoir. So in times of, any time that the Corps is releasing or the DRA is releasing from the other numerous reservoirs in the Brazos Basin, we'll be able to pick that water up and store it in Allen's Creek. So what that does for you locally, Williamson County, Bell County, McLennan County, is it allows water to stay local in reservoirs longer. So it's, I don't want to say it's drought proofing, but it's a very significant drought protection. Because there are times that we will be able to attack mild drought with just releases out of Allen's Creek. Because we could go back and have a talk show about the first slide that Aaron showed you, where during times in 2012, 2013, during parts of the most significant drought in the Brazos Basin, we would have actually had water in the Brazos that we could have pumped into Allen's Creek and then released out of Allen's Creek. So it's going to be over 100,000 acre feet of water. It's going to be a significant tool in drought protecting the Brazos Basin. So we couldn't be more excited than that. Did an outstanding job. A lot of the lower basin customers really got involved, and this is a huge win for us. So we're really excited about it. The other thing that I want to touch on real quick is the debris removal is not trivial. Debris removal, for those of you that have seen, and I know you guys have seen it before, when we have drought and trees die and then we have flooding, the years following drought, we spend a lot of time on the phone shrugging our shoulders going, that's not our responsibility. And no one can come up with whose responsibility it is to move acres and acres of trees off of bridges and roadways. So the cost of any bill that would force any of you or a river authority to go in and start doing debris removal would be significant. And I understand from a county perspective, where you own bridges, you probably understand some of that cost now, but there's going to have to be a lot of conversation going forward on how we're going to figure out how to fund debris removal from bridges and the river system if that happens. And again, it's a reoccurring cost, because every time we have flooding and drought, that's what happens in Texas. We're going to relive that cost. Sorry.
No, it's fine. The thing I would add to that is, as it relates to the debris removal, because David's right, it's not trivial. One of the things that study will look at is ongoing maintenance of tributaries and river systems. And if you take that to the next level, what that means is continual removing of debris over time, all the time. And the reason that they want to look at that is, in order to pull down FEMA dollars, a lot of times you have to show an ongoing effort to maintain something. If you want to pull down federal dollars to fix that, I don't think they, being the legislature and all those discussions, understand fully the scope of the cost of what that would take in a lot of different areas like Brazos, Basin, and Southern Tennessee. So I think that the study that will come out of Senate Bill 6 will at least shed some light on the type of cost numbers that we're looking at for something like that. You know, where we go from there, I don't know, but at least help them understand the scope of what that would be. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Was what planning process bill, eight? Yeah. What's the role of the water planning groups in that?
So they will set up different groups. The groups will be similar to the regional water planning groups, but it won't be the same.
But a separate silo?
Yes, it'll be a separate, and their responsibility will be flooding as opposed to water supply. They're modeled after, and they'll look a lot like, I think, the regional water planning groups. And there may be some interaction because of the fact that Senate Bill 8 requires the regional flood planning groups, when they're looking at projects, to attempt to find a water supply benefit. So if you can find a flood mitigation project that also has a water supply benefit, that's a bonus. So there may very well be some interaction at some point. I think it's kind of as yet to be defined as the water development board puts together that process. I think we'll know more how they're going to work together. Thank you.
I've got a question on your debris removal. We have a lot of local flooding problems on roads with actual stream flow maintenance upstream of the lake. We've got watershed authorities that are supposed to be maintaining streams and creeks, and they won't allow people in the creek to remove log jams at no cost to them. Individual landowners that would like to go in and clean up the property that localized flooding. Same way with more here locally on some tributaries that are causing localized road flooding and property damage. And my last call to them was, well, we've never had anybody ask us about it. Is that going to be included as part of that?
It actually will. One of the aspects of some of the study work that's required in Senate 06 is local regulations that prevent the removal of debris. So they will look at that. They're going to look at whether it be federal jurisdiction, state. Are there things that are preventing private citizens or other jurisdictions from being able to maintain tributaries and creeks and streams? So yes, that's the Thank you.
Right, I'm just gonna work through a bunch of the activities that we do throughout the basin, and hopefully having that knowledge will be beneficial to you, so if you ever need some of that data, you know where to come to, because we all have them, all publicly available. But also, if you have concerns about something, you can come to us, and hopefully we can work into a variety of different projects to help find some answers, or most of our major water quality concerns, at least on the smaller water bodies, do usually come from the public or people who have eyes on them on a daily basis who can tell us that. So I'll start with primarily in the Brazos Basin. We are the primary data collector for the Clean Rivers program of Texas. That was a program created by the legislature back in the early 90s. We communicate all our data to TCEQ on streams and rivers. We do the assessments for compliance with state regulations, and also work back and forth with TCEQ quite a bit on data flow, on what is meeting its surface water quality standard, what is not. And when we do find issues, we also do a lot of investigations to try to identify sources and hopefully find remedies to those issues to improve the water quality throughout the streams. Water quality, environmental flow standards, and water quality standards validation is, I think, probably one of the most important things we do. A bad standard doesn't help anybody. It doesn't benefit the environment, and it certainly does not benefit discharge permittees throughout the basin, right? So we spend a lot of time and effort when we think a standard is inappropriate, or we don't think it reflects what we're seeing from the aquatic species out in the rivers, trying to go back in and work with TCQ to do studies to validate and either just set a new standard or prove that the existing standard is okay, then we need to go look for some other reason of why things are not well in the stream. Currently, we're actively doing 9 sites for environmental flow standards compliance, and over the years, we have done a variety of different water quality parameters where we think we've had inappropriate standards that aren't helping the environment and aren't beneficial to land users around the area. Reservoir fisheries habitat improvement. This came out of negotiations with TCQ and Parks and Wildlife during our system operations permit and our water management plan program. So essentially, I think we were somewhat a victim of timing. We were in the middle of the drought. Reservoir levels were at a pretty historical low in some areas, and there became a lot of concern for the fisheries in those reservoirs. That as the water levels dropped, it stranded a lot of their habitat. A lot of their cover, the aquatic vegetation things were left way up on the bank, and there wasn't base habitat at those deeper levels. So this program, which we are partnering with Parks and Wildlife on, is going in and basically placing artificial structures either deeper in the reservoir or doing other projects based on the lake's morphology and its fishery to help strengthen that fishery so they're more resilient to long-term drought, and can hopefully, if we ever have a repeat of the 2011 drought, which hopefully we won't, but it's probably going to happen at some point, that hopefully these fisheries will fare a lot better than they did during the last year. Threatened and endangered species monitoring. This has become more and more important over the years as different environmental advocate groups have kind of descended on Texas looking at a lot of different species and their protection. I've talked to you for several years over freshwater mussels. We are currently working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on a federal permitting process to hopefully not only benefit and conserve and preserve the mussels for long term, but also hopefully protect our water supply. Because the impacts of the Federal Endangered Species Act can be dramatic. We are also starting off for projects to address the Brazos water snake, which is a Brazos Basin endemic snake in the Upper Basin. So hopefully trying to generate the science needed to fend off a potential listing in the future. That's one of the species we've assessed where we think we might have some vulnerabilities in the future. So we are starting studies to gain the science needed to fight the listing. Invasive species monitoring, everyone's heard about zebra mussels. We are actively doing zebra mussel detection monitoring on a couple of our lakes. We're also looking at in-stream impacts downstream reservoirs where most zebra mussels are present, just as we really don't anticipate and so far have not seen any indication that they're really going to take hold in the stream environment like they have in the reservoir, and that's really a function of the habitat just as there in the stream. But they can get on bridge pylons and other things, and of course there is concerns for could they overtake the freshwater mussels that everyone is now concerned about in the rivers. I think that's really been a thin argument, but it is out there and it is thrown about runoff. Also, aquatic plants. We have been very fortunate in the Brazos that we don't have a huge problem with invasive aquatic species. We've had a few bouts here and there in different reservoirs. The Sabine River Authority, San Jacinto River Authority, they spend billions if you combine all their money together trying to fight giant salvinia, water hyacinth, different species. So we definitely want to keep an eye on all our reservoirs, and if we see something, address it quickly and dramatically so we don't end up in that situation where we have reservoirs completely overrun with invasive species. And then when we do find water quality issues that need to be addressed or where there isn't a clear smoking gun, we have conducted over the years a variety of different studies to try to get at the source of those issues and then provide that information back to the local communities, TCEQ, some of the people beyond the study, and we don't have a lot of authority that we are able to institute a change, but we can at least provide the source identification and recommended solutions, and then those that do have that ability can take that and run with it, how they so choose in their communities. This is one we don't do a lot, but when we have done it, it's been awarded which is support law enforcement agencies, our lake rangers. We have also taken samples for some of the other county sheriffs when they needed, had concerns about illegal dumping, bacteria discharges, things like that. And so all of these different things we have worked on before in the past. And for BRA facilities, we do environmental support and permitting. So when there are, there's a variety of different regulations we have to comply with. So we will go out and help our different properties work through that process as they need it, and hopefully give them a permit quickly so that they can move forward with little disruption to their activity. And then these are kind of some of my biggest issues I see facing us as water suppliers, water users. First off, balancing competing interests. Water quality and water supply are sometimes in direct opposition from each other, and trying to find that balance, and you will find constituents on the extremes of both that can make things very difficult in trying to find that compromise troublesome. So that's probably one of our biggest issues, is trying to find that balance where you're still benefiting the environment but also not harming the water supply. Population growth, that's just an issue in general. We're growing faster than our water supply is, and so how do we overcome that? Nutrient regulations are a big concern for us moving forward in the future. Right now, EPA has been rather quiet but I suspect that will change, and they will come back at TCEQ at some point in the future with full force. That can be a very expensive prospect, especially for municipalities and their wastewater plants, trying to reduce nutrients in streams. We've already seen that with some reservoirs where they had worked through standards. Belton and Stillhouse, which I think are probably two of the cleanest, nicest reservoirs in our basin, have some of the most restricted nutrient standards in the state, and that is designed to be protective, but it also does not allow for growth. So how do we balance our population growth, which is going to require more discharge, more nutrient loading, and the natural aging process of a reservoir, which also leads towards more nutrient loading with these standards that are very, very low. And unfortunately, they're going to go after the easy hanging fruit, which is wastewater discharges first. Destruction of riparian vegetation, we are seeing that, and it's historical in our basin. We have quite a bit of that, and it does go back to a lot of those endangered species issues. It also leads to a lot of erosion during these high flow events because the bank's natural armoring of trees and vegetation is gone. So that is causing, especially in some of our lower basin areas, a lot of issues and concerns for increased sedimentation, erosion, contributing to flooding problems because all that eroded sediment goes somewhere and gets deposited somewhere. Rush science and regulations, and then a lot of decisions in the last 10 years or so have been based on consensus, not hard science. And while that is a quick and easy way to address a problem, when you're dealing with the environment and ecology, it goes back to the same thing. That regulation is a lot of times worse than no regulation. It doesn't always protect the environment, and it doesn't provide a good business climate either. My questions, I'll pass it on to Mr. Thompson.
I have somewhat soft spoken, so don't raise your hand if you can't hear me. But, what I'd like to do is a little deviation from the presentation that we usually do and talk a little bit about the business model we have for rate making. And I'm going to go line by line through the model, explaining each of the line items, and then basically come back and show you the slide presentation that we would show for our FY 2020 budget. The numbers are kind of small, sorry. But the first line is the operating expenses. And from the budget period from 19 to 2020, we had about a $3 million increase. And this is primarily due to the Corps of Engineers budget increase from 19 to 20. And that contains the expenses that we have to take care of our 8 core lakes in our basin. The next 2 lines are our debt service payments. The first one's called not for coverage, or for coverage. And the one for coverage, I'll talk a little bit more later on. But that is basically East Williamson County, and that's where we purchased or installed the intake, as well as the Taylor facility. The next one is our not subject to coverage, our debt service. These are loans. These are loans to the Corps of Engineers for our 8 lakes for the water storage that we have. Also, we also have state participation loans in there too, for Allen's Creek. Now, in 19, we had 30% of Allen's Creek. In 2020, as Matt talked to you earlier about, we absorbed the 70% portion of it. That's about $1.5 million of additional expense. Next is our operating projects. These are projects that do not build to an infrastructure. There are some studies, there are assessments, basically things that do not build out a major infrastructure. So they're included in our rates too. Now it comes to the other income. First is the non-system. These are rate holders that contract that are very old. That revenue is not part of our system rate. The other revenue we have is basically our water treatment, our waste treatment plants that we own, our interest expense. That gives you about $18 million of extra revenue.
Now, the last piece is basically the debt coverage. Per our board, we have 1.3 ratio coverage that we have to maintain. So if you take the 30%, multiply times the, going back up to East Williamson County debt of the 2.5, that's the 760,000. So the math is you take the expenses, you subtract the revenue, and you add back in the debt coverage. That gives you the gross financial need that we have to have for that. Now, the thing here is though, we see that our rate is 82. So to use another element or tool in our rate making process, we use a rate stabilization reserve. So back in 19, our rate really would have been, instead of 76.5, it would have been 82. And we went from 74 to 76. So raising it to 82 would have been a big increase. So we used the rate stabilization reserve in 19 of 1.8. And again in 2020, we added 1.5 for Allen's Creek of the additional expense. It would have raised the rate to 82. So using rate stabilization reserve again, for the 1.3, we're able to pull it back to 79. We just mailed out to many of our customers that we're going to only charge you $79 an acre foot. So using rate stabilization reserve, we're able to keep it at 79. So now taking a look at some of the revenue numbers and things that are in there. You can see the pieces that we're talking about. Right here is the numbers for the non-system rate contracts. The 11.6 revenue, we talked about the other, and the pieces that make up that. We also have cost reimbursement. This is revenue that we get from our facilities, our waste treatment plants that we maintain and take care of. In that situation, every dollar of cost that we incur, we bill back to our customer. This is like Temple Belton, Dozier Farm, those types of operations we do. Last is basically the 37 million, which is what we get from the $79 an acre foot, divided by, or $79 an acre foot, times the 468,000 we have for our new rates. Operating expenses, again, those are the pieces that you just saw earlier in the rate making process. Cost reimbursable, which is 12.8, offset the revenue that we had. Here are the operating projects. Again, these are projects that are assessments, they're studies, programs that we use to help figure out what we need to move forward with. Many of Tiffany's programs are in this as well, or studies as well. We do have some of the programs that get offset, grants, and other stakeholders that are out there. I also want to mention too, the core expenses is projected to be about $8.2 million at both the debt service as well as the O&M expenses. It runs about $18 an acre foot in our system rate. And these are to maintain the core lakes that we have out there. So looking at the capital projects for next year, you can see about 70% of the expenses are going to go to new water supply, and that is mainly made up of Allen's Creek. Here are the projects that we plan to do. As you can see, Allen's Creek is $30 million, and of that, 23 million of it is what we have to pay. If you can see, 23 million of it is to pay Houston City of Houston, with the balance to start the project that David Collins was talking about before. The other expenses are used to help build out our 3 lakes that we own and the infrastructure for that. So now looking at the water that we're going to sell for next year, 719,000 acre feet. 65% of it is basically system rate, 468,000 acre feet that we're at. This gives you kind of a breakdown of how those percentages work out. The 65% is our system rate group. The next largest group is our 2-tier and our utilities, which are some of our long-term contracts that we have out there. This kind of gives you perspective from acre feet to dollars for amounts per 1,000 gallons. And you can see between the 2 years, we had less than a penny increase per 1,000 gallons. And I put this chart together to kind of give you a historical look, a forecast look at what we're looking at on these new rates. And as you can see, our debt starts to grow as we start building out Allen's Creek and many of the other infrastructure builds that we have. And this takes a look at how the rate stabilization is being used. As you can see right now, we are using the rate stabilization reserve right here. As the rate increases, it smooths out, but then it drops back down. When we drop that down, meaning that we're not using the rate stabilization reserve, but we're actually now self-funding a lot of our projects and not incurring additional debt. And this is just a reminder about interruptible water. Just that we show this each year just to let you know that any request under 1,000 acre feet or less is priority. Deadline is August 30th, which is Friday. And then we do have established firm deadlines for payments and executing contract. And once again, the board approves the 2020 interruptible water in October board meeting.
Go back to your slide where you show the 10-year projections. First of all, to note, we don't ever budget in interruptible water because it is interruptible. So a lot of that rate stabilization is funded through the sale of interruptible water that we will determine going into the summertime how much of that water will be available. I assure you there will be interruptible water available this year. So the budget numbers that you're looking at don't anticipate that. But I want you to get a grasp of what's happening here. What's happening here in our supply and in our business is the same thing that's happening in the many municipalities across the state. You're getting older and you're needing new. We're getting older. We have dams that are approaching 100 years old. Our youngest dam is 40 years old. We're going to spend a lot of money in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years making sure that those assets last another 50 years or 100 years. We're spending a lot of money right now assessing concrete at a dam that's almost 100 years old. So we're trying to take all of these activities and roll them into a risk management strategy, a capital improvement plan based on looking at the risk and ownership of these assets so that we can get our hands better around the precision of these numbers. So each year that we come to you over the next 3 or 4 years, we'll be better at projecting what those numbers look like. Allen's Creek is going to be $500 million. That's not the last water supply that we need. We're looking at Lake Whitney reallocation through the Corps. We're going to, as soon as the permit hits my desk for Allen's Creek, we're going to look at bringing pipeline water from Lake Somerville into Williamson and Bell County for future water supply. And all of those projects are rolled into these numbers and they're going to be refined as we move forward. So we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of challenges ahead of us. Rate making is a challenge just like it is for you in the municipal world where you're trying to figure out how you prioritize fixing the old and building the new. All of this information will be available on our webpage. But furthermore, since it's difficult to present this in such a manner that we answer all of your questions, if you want us to come sit with you and go through these projects and go through these numbers, you and your finance department or you and your engineering department would be more than willing to do that. One of the reasons that we moved this meeting from later in July to now, and hopefully in the years to come it'll even be a little bit earlier, is so that we have the time to interact with you before we go back to our board in July to get approval to ratify the budget. So that's kind of what the presentation looks like today. Any thoughts, comments, or questions?
What's the source of funds for the rate stabilization fund?
It would be through water and wastewater operations. It would be through the sale of interruptible water, and then just some of our general revenues.
What's the balance?
Well, the balance of that fund is our general revenue. It's the amount of money that we have available for either projects to stabilize these rates to do future work with.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna start off the year with, like, 2020, probably about 85 again.
85?
So we have quite a bit to work with in the next episode. You know, it self-funds a lot of the projects, because we start getting into the Allen's Creek, and we're starting to consume millions of dollars, and that's when we need to start going out and borrowing against it, and that replenishes as well. We have some reserves as well.
You have a separate reserve fund?
We have in the budget end, yes, but that's not something we put into our financial statements, it's not a balance sheet. Just rate making only for.
What's your policy for the level of your reserve?
We don't really have, I mean, we have to maintain
Jim?
1.3 with the debt ratio, that's about it. We have to have a 90-day working.
Yeah, we have the 90-day working capital. Our board passed a resolution in 2007 that we keep 90 days of working capital over and above the rate stabilization fund. So that 90 days is always there, and it's increased as the budget.
But in my forecast that I showed the board, I'm usually much higher than that. There isn't really set number. As Jim said, 90 is all I have to have. Sometimes I usually like to try to keep at least probably 180 to 200 days.
Any others? Again, if you want to have further details on the projects and how we're rate making, we'd be more than willing to come sit down and visit with you. So, oh, you know, I do want to add one thing. We show a slide up here where so much of that money, so much of what the Corps of Engineers does impacts your rates and your budgets. Think of that as rental space, because they own the infrastructure, and it's the state of Texas water that's stored there. The Corps does an outstanding job of visiting with us a couple times a year, walking through their budgets. So we get to ask a lot of difficult questions about how they're spending money. But more importantly, we're really an advocate of wanting to make sure that the Corps gets the funds that they need to do the projects that they need. Because it's obviously their ability to store water is the water that many Texans drink. So we need to make sure that those reservoirs are well maintained, and they do a heck of a job with it. So anyway, okay, what's the directions for lunch? Lunch through here?
Out to the kitchen, Kathy got it all set up in the kitchen, we're gonna go through.
All right, thank y'all very much.